This is an Empty Closet Radio podcast. Get more at facebook.com/emptyclosetradio.
Hi, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sam.
And this is The Empty Closet.
The show for everyone, whether you're in the closet
Or out and proud. Or
somewhere in between.
This week, it's legal to get an abortion, Sam, in Queensland. You're no longer a criminal. What's the deal?
Okay, so it's a little bit, you've been able to access abortion in Queensland for some time, but you've had to jump through a lot of legal hoops. So, in 1898, so 2 years before Federation, the Queensland Criminal Code regarding abortion was last updated. So, it's been a little while. These laws have had some time to settle in. And basically they had a morality section that said that abortion was immoral. So it was a morality clause, and that's why it was against the law.
So this is where we take parts of the Bible and write them into law.
Well, yeah, except the Bible and abortion is a whole other kettle of fish because, anyway, we won't get into that today.
Right, okay.
So, after much campaigning, so from basically the 1970s forward, there's been active campaigning to legalise abortion access in Queensland. So take away the risk of legal action and make abortion more accessible.
So I just want to clarify, when we're talking about abortion, are we talking about, how you can, take that pill that is the morning after, and I think there's another pill that you can take that's a week after. That's not really counted as an abortion, is that right?
That's right. So for the purposes of law, no. There is an abortion pill. So that's a medical abortion. That's where you induce a miscarriage through drugs. That is not the day after you have sex, because the point of the morning after pill works by stopping the egg implanting in the uterine wall. So pregnancy, medically speaking, basically is when that egg is implanted. So it stops the pregnancy taking place.
Right. So we're not talking about the morning after pill, which is probably something that's been way more accessible. Oh, I've even seen ads for it and stuff down at Sexual Health. So we're talking about you've gotten a bit further along than just the morning after. Yeah.
So what we're talking about is in Queensland until recently, you had to have two doctors confirm that for the health or life of the mother or certain medical issues with the fetus or the unborn child, and they were always a bit nebulous, abortion was illegal. So you had to get two doctors to signify that you needed an abortion for, it could be your mental health. Like if you suffered schizophrenia and you were going to have to stop taking your medication because you were pregnant, that was an adequate reason for abortion. If you had depression and you'd been raped and this was causing you anxiety, that was grounds for the health and well-being of the mother to have an abortion. But you had to get two separate doctors to certify that. And because it was such a tricky legal area, not many places did abortion. So surgical abortions and even supervised medical abortions in Cairns, for example, were not available when I was in high school, because I can remember family planning telling us, these are your rights, you have to go to Townsville if this happens. So this is a big problem, is access.
Yeah, and I feel like being in a regional area, access would be made even more difficult, because if you, say, have to get two doctors' opinions, maybe you go to your local doctor, and if they will even put their opinion in writing, then additional to that, you have to go maybe to the next town and get another doctor to give their opinion in writing. You might have to go to a couple of doctors before you find two that are willing to put down their thoughts.
Yeah, and there's certainly the, quite aside from whether they ethically, agree with abortion or not, there's also the fact that they used to fear prosecution themselves. So, in the 80s, in Bill K. Peterson years, he tried to arrest surgeons for providing abortions, even though they were considered medically necessary. That wasn't good enough. So this is the kind of history we're coming from in Queensland, to the laws that are now.
And I know it was such a grey area. What I've heard is that basically the situation meant that a lot of public hospitals and public doctors were just like, we're not going to touch it. We just don't want to have an opinion about it. And so then what does that mean for the mother? Like you're stuck in no man's land.
Well, what historically happened in most places is that the rise in unsafe abortions happened. So there used to be, long ago, in Melbourne, no, not even that long ago. This was in Brisbane, sorry, my mistake. Attached to the Royal Women and Children's Hospital, there was a ward that was solely for women who'd gone septic from unsafe abortions. And they basically died slow and horrible deaths because they'd had illegal back alley abortions because they were desperate.
Empty Closet Radio. Listen to us using your TuneIn radio app on your smartphone. Very smart.
New abortion laws in Queensland mean that all this back-out abortion stuff is about to change, and change for the better, I think it is. Sam, can you tell us a bit more about what these new rules mean?
Okay, so basically, the new rules are that until 22 weeks, you do not require two doctors' approval. You do not require, you don't have to give a reason for your procedure. You can access an abortion. Now, 22 weeks is considered the cutoff point of viability. So before that point, the lungs haven't formed, so the fetus cannot survive outside the body of the mother.
So it's not just some arbitrary, oh, hey, politicians, let's all choose 22 weeks. That sounds like a good number.
No, it's very much considered the medical point of viability. After that point, it's still not great. I mean, at 23, 24 weeks, you're looking at less than 50% survival rate. So it's not great. But anyway, there's a chance at that point. So after 22 weeks, if you want a late term, what they term a late term abortion, you still need the two doctors' approval, and there has to be a reason. Now, this is because the vast majority of late procedures are because an anomaly has been picked up that was not picked up before. So this is somebody who's pregnant with a baby that they really want, and they go in for a scan, and it turns out that there's half the brain's missing, or the skull cap. There's something really horrifically wrong, and this baby is going to be born and probably suffer and then die very soon. So this is considered like an act of mercy.
And so it's not just people leaving it late to make up their minds.
No, because if you wait 22 weeks, why would you wait 22 weeks?
I don't know. I'm not having a baby.
This is true. But no, people do not. I'm sure that one person somewhere has left it that long, but as the vast, vast, vast majority of late-term abortion stories that have come out in this debate are about wanted babies that either like mum suddenly got cancer or something. Like there's something has gone horrifically wrong, and that's why this procedure has to happen. Now, there's also the other things that have come up is that there's going to be a safe zone around abortion clinics. So if you are walking into the abortion clinic, you can't be like crowded and harassed by people telling you you're about to murder a baby. And if a doctor can still refuse to do the procedure and that's fine, but they have to then refer you to another doctor who will. So they can't just go, no, I want nothing to do with this, and leave you to work it out on your own. They have to go, I'm going to give you this referral to this clinic. They'll talk to you there.
So there's still like a back door open for, like, say if you live in a conservative town, perhaps maybe a little bit more remote, there's still that option for the only doctor in town to be like, no, sorry, I'm not touching it on my belief grounds. And here's your referral for someone in Brisbane.
Yeah, pretty much. And that is a tricky ethics area because, you know, you can't really, that's a whole area of medical ethics around the rights of treating professionals versus the rights of patients.
Yeah. Oh, it must be a minefield.
Completely a minefield. But the result of all this is that this is something that will be easier to access and basically will hopefully have less trauma attached because you don't have to go and deal with people in shady alleys.
Well, and also, you're not going to be a criminal for doing this procedure. The doctor's not going to be a criminal for doing this procedure. It brings everything a little bit more above board and makes it a little bit more straightforward from what I've kind of read about the legislation. Now, I do want to talk in a moment about some of the debate around the legislation because that is particularly interesting. But just before we finish talking about what the actual new rules are, if you are in a situation where you do need to access these sorts of services, make sure that you do talk to your doctor, talk to a medical professional, and of course in Cairns we can always recommend talking to Sexual Health. They'll definitely get you in the right direction.
Empty Closet Radio. Like us on Facebook.
Now, just before we move on, Andrew, and I should have mentioned this sooner, I have used some incorrect terminology. I have been saying pregnant women and mothers. The vast majority of people who are pregnant are cis women and use the term mothers, but it doesn't actually, that is not the only people this law affects. It affects genderqueer and non-binary people. It affects trans people, anybody with a uterus. So I just want to clarify that. That's my mistake.
Anyone with a uterus who is pregnant with a baby inside them, a fetus inside them.
If you find someone without a uterus who's got a baby inside them, then you're going to be famous for reporting that, just FYI.
So, Sam, one thing I loved about this political quagmire that occurred around this legislation was that all of the political parties, they said, okay, we actually don't really want to have to take an official stance on this, though some of them had like an unofficial official stance. So we're going to let all of our members of parliament just vote with a conscience vote. And a conscience vote means, hey, you can just decide based on what you think that your constituents would want you to vote, which, just as a side, I thought that all political representatives were supposed to do that anyway. But anyway, back to the actual facts.
That's very very idealist of you, Andrew.
I am an idealist. That is true. So basically it meant that all of the parliamentarians were allowed to like vote the way that they felt was the best for their people they were representing, which is like ideally how parliament should work.
That's true. And there were 3 members of the opposition who crossed the floor, so to speak, to vote with the majority government to decriminalise abortion to 22 weeks.
Because basically, like, am I right in saying the unofficial view of the Labour Party was... Liberal Party was, no, you should vote no to this legislation. Having legislation from the 1800s is absolutely fine. It's perfect. And the opposition was like, so Labour's unofficial/official position was maybe it's time to update these laws.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Now there were 10 members of the opposition who originally were in favour if the limit was set to 16 weeks, not 22 weeks, and then voted no to the move to 22 weeks. So in their opinion, that's just way too late.
Yeah, because they ran like this massive campaign about like, there were all those protesters that were like, after 22 weeks, what will happen?
Yeah, there was a lot of misinformation and outright fibs in some of those protests. But there's reasons that it was upped. But anyway, the three who crossed the floor have now been threatened publicly, with not being up for pre-selection in the next election, because how dare they, given a conscious vote, and possibly voting in the way of their constituents, how dare they vote opposite to what their party wanted them to vote?
How dare they vote what their constituents want them to do? Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's not a good look for the party.
Yeah, not a good look. Understatement of the century. Sam, we should seriously be on a proper news show. That's not a good look.
We're very fancy pants.
So, right, they crossed the floor, they've now been threatened, and just out of interest, Sam, were these people, I don't know, were they like men, maybe middle-aged white men?
Look, the majority of our parliament is of a male persuasion, by all appearances and from what they say. The majority of those who voted no were men. The majority of women in parliament voted yes. Not really a shock.
Oh, really? Because I thought that I was really thinking that it would be the other way around, Sam.
Oh, yeah, completely,
Sam, I found my men's rights t-shirts. Tell me Does this mean that, like, you know, my partner, if we're pregnant, can just, like, rock up and get an abortion and, like, kill my baby as well?
Yes, but in all seriousness, this is actually seen as a domestic violence issue because a really big, I know you were joking around, but this is serious. A really big way that that vulnerable women or people who can get pregnant are persuaded, shall we say, to stay in relationships is through sabotaging their birth control. And if they're pregnant, then you can't leave me because where will you go? You're a single mother or you don't have the money. So reproductive violence is what it's called. And if you require the other partner's consent, that becomes much easier. And if abortion is illegal or difficult to access, it's also harder to leave an abusive relationship because more and more you're locked into this relationship with this person who will not allow you to leave and ties you down with children. So it is actually an issue of rights in that respect as well. But yes, theoretically, your much loved baby, and look, I have no doubt this has happened. Somebody wants a baby, their partner doesn't, and their partner has an abortion, and that's terrible. But she's actually, or they're actually the one who has to carry the baby. So until we perfect technology that means that we can implant a fetus from the person who's originally carrying it into their partner, I think that's how it's going to stay.
Right. Okay. I'm taking off my men's rights t-shirt and I'm going to fold it up and put it in the cupboard. Until the next time we talk about this.
Thanks for listening to The Empty Closet, brought to you by 1019 Coast FM Cairns.